This video will introduce the concept of market efficiency. We will first look at the concepts of consumer surplus and producer surplus, and we'll also explain the concept of the allocative efficiency of markets. So what is the concept of consumer surplus? Well, basically, consumer surplus refers to the extra satisfaction or utility. Utility is another word for satisfaction in economics, that is gained by consumers from paying a lower price than they were initially willing to pay. So whenever a consumer ends up paying a price that is lower than what they were initially willing to pay, we say that that consumer has earned or gained some consumer surplus. Basically, consumer surplus, if you look at this diagram right here, all consumers will end up paying the equilibrium price. But you have consumers who were willing to pay a higher price. For example, at this price, some consumers were willing to buy this quantity. At this other price, which is higher than equilibrium, consumers were willing to buy this quantity, and so on. If you look at all the prices above the equilibrium, all of these consumers will gain some consumer surplus because they will still end up paying the equilibrium price. So the shaded triangle under the demand curve, this triangle here that's shaded in purple, that's the consumer surplus, total consumer surplus earned or gained in the market. The concept of producer surplus is very similar to the concept of consumer surplus, but it is from the side of the producer. Basically, this is the excess actual earnings that a producer makes from a given quantity of output, over and above what that producer was willing to accept for that output. Again, because all producers will receive the equilibrium price, some producers were willing to produce a specific quantity at a lower price. So for example, at this lower price, this was going to be the quantity supplied, another lower price, and so on. So basically, just like the consumer surplus, this shaded triangle here that is between the supply curve and the vertical axis, this gives you the total producer surplus that is gained or earned by the producers in this market. Basically, it is the idea that some producers will end up receiving a higher price than what they were initially willing to accept. They were willing to accept a lower price, but they end up receiving a higher price. In total, that is the producer surplus earned or gained in this market. If you add the total consumer surplus and the total producer surplus together, that will give you something called the community surplus or the social surplus. So community surplus or social surplus equals consumer surplus plus producer surplus. The community surplus will be this big triangle here, because that's the total of the consumer surplus, the area shaded in purple, and the producer surplus, the area shaded in green. At equilibrium, whenever a market is at equilibrium, community surplus is maximized. So if you want to reach the maximum surplus for the whole community or for the whole society, this can only happen at equilibrium. And this is called, the market is at a state of allocative efficiency. It is the optimum or optimal allocation of resources from the point of view of society as a whole. If you want to reach the best allocation of resources for the whole society, not just for consumers who might want lower prices or for producers who might want higher prices, but from the point of view of society as a whole, allocative efficiency happens when community surplus is maximized, and this only happens at the equilibrium price. So later on we will look at this in more detail, but it is good to know now that the supply curve equals, another way of looking at it, it's the marginal social cost curve. So it's the extra social cost for the whole society. And the demand curve is the marginal social benefit curve for the whole society. At equilibrium, marginal social cost equals marginal social benefit. And this is the other condition of allocative efficiency. A market is at a state of allocative efficiency when marginal social cost is equal to marginal social benefit. A free market will lead to allocative efficiency, and this is when this happens at equilibrium, and at this point community surplus is maximized. It is the optimum allocation of resources from society's point of view. This happens when the market reaches equilibrium without any government intervention.